Welcome back. Welcome to another edition of Nain's Shorts, where we tackle the big questions. Not really. We just have fun because we're talking about training and we love to do it. We do it probably more than we should, but it's a hobby. It's something we enjoy very much. And recently we were having a back and forth amongst some students and our instructor, and a joke was made about one of them about how intense they looked in a particular picture during a seminar we just recently were involved in. And it sparked an idea. It sparked a topic that I'd like to discuss with you today, and that is, I don't know about the rest of you, but I know for me, um, I would very much get overly excited when training, and even though I was told, hey, go slow, take it easy, I would inevitably speed up. And the thing about it is that I sped up, and it took me a long time to realize that it was me speeding up because my training partner would inevitably have to speed up to keep up with me. And then all of a sudden, it's far more intense than it needed to be, and it's not something that's completely gone away. So I was starting to wonder what is actually going on. What happens in our brains that gets us to that point? Well, first and foremost, we get excited. Excitement comes with a certain amount of chemicals and, endorphins, but also adrenaline. You're using weapons, you're attacking each other. Simulation, sure, but it's a weapon still swinging in front of you, so there is a sense of danger there. While as calm as we may seem on the outside, our brains are still pumping all that stuff into our body. We're still producing adrenaline. We're still getting amped up. And at the beginning, we don't know how to quite handle it, so we get more and more aggressive. Over time, we get comfortable with that state. But do we necessarily get more relaxed? Do we necessarily mitigate that amount of adrenaline, or do we just learn how to function within it? Do we learn how to just, that's just our level, that's just how we train, and we tell ourselves that, but we don't actually take the time to completely relax or remove as much of that adrenaline as possible? So what else happens in our brains, especially as a beginning student, where we want to get things right, when we want to do things, we're hyper focused on getting the technique done properly. We're focused on doing it right, on appeasing our instructors, or just getting better or doing it better than we did before. That level of concentration, while great in some aspects, oftentimes, as has been my experience, we get so wrapped up in it that we tense up even more. And what happens? We start getting frustrated, and we start getting stiffer, and we feel like we have to move faster and harder. And what's happening? Well, our brains are getting stressed out. We are starting to dump cortisol. It's a reactive agent, something that happens in our brain that it's natural, but when we get an overabundance, we feel stressed, we feel aggravated, and in a training scenario, especially with weapons, that can become very painful for one of you or both of you, because again, you already have the adrenaline going, the excitement, and then all of a sudden you start speeding up without realizing that you're doing it. So your training partner or your instructor starts speeding up as well. Then you start tensing up, so all of a sudden you're forcing your movements even more. So now you're hitting harder, now you're putting your entire weight behind it, even though you feel you're still going slow and smooth and steady as you were told and instructed to do from the beginning. All of a sudden, you're so focused on getting it right, and you're so freaked out because now your training partner's moving faster and hitting harder, and you don't understand why. So the cortisol dumps even more, and you become even more stressed. Then all of a sudden, you feel like you have to move even faster to keep up with the person in front of you, when in reality, all that is going on in your head, and your body is feeling the results of what's happening in that brain. Adrenaline, cortisol, all the other chemicals that are dumped when you having a good situation that all of a sudden becomes a stressful situation and somebody gets hurt. Now, again, this has happened to me. I've been involved, and even not that long ago, and which is why it feels like we've gotten better at managing it, but have we really? Or do we just become comfortable in that setting and that's where we go? What can we do to then alleviate that so we avoid those types of accidents? Because as instructors, we have our level of function, where we are, where we think we should be as instructors, and the way that we move, we say that's just naturally how I move. But is it? Is it naturally how we move, or is it just that our body remembers how it was and it goes straight to that heightened level of, let's say, controlled anxiety, where your body is dumping all those chemicals and you're still in control, but accidents still happen? Now, why is that? Is it the student not paying attention, or is it us not paying attention to the way that we are delivering things, the way that we are moving, whether we're punching too hard, whether we're moving too fast? And how do we stop that? Now, training, excuse me, in the Bladed Mind, from very early on, we were taught to just talk through the process. Now, what does that have to do with anything related to what we're talking about? Well, oxygen. Oxygen is the easiest way to kind of lower our cortisol levels and relax the body so we're not as stressed or as agitated, so those accidents don't happen and we can focus on the lesson. Breathing. That's how we get that into our bodies. I know it shouldn't, sounds dumb saying it like that, but we often forget to breathe. We've seen it time and time again with students. I know I remember it with myself and other students that were coming up with me. We'd get so wrapped up in what we were trying to do that our faces would turn red because we would literally stop breathing. And that causes even higher degrees of stress on the body that force us to then be more stiff and move faster and harder to compensate for the fact that our bodies aren't functioning as well as they could, simply because we hold our breath. So talking allows us then to get that oxygen through. And it's not to say that there's any wrong way of training in this sense. It's just, what are we aware of and how does it affect what we're trying to do? Now, if that degree of adrenaline, of stress that your body's going through is part of the training, because let's face it, in a life or death situation, you're going to be stressed. You're going to have all that adrenaline. You're going to have all that cortisol in your body. And whether or not you can function is depending on whether or not you trained how to overcome that. And again, breathing is one of the easiest ways, but can we do that in a stressful situation? Then again, if that's the focus of your training at that time, yes, I can see it being a positive thing. But if it's something that's always there without us realizing it through our training, is it really that helpful, or is it keeping us from truly understanding what's going on? We've often preached about the idea of staying calm and relaxed as possible in a bad situation so you can make good choices, so you don't go beyond the need of force to be able to get out of that bad situation. And if your brain isn't relaxed, isn't at its highest function, would we be able to make that distinction? Would we be able to then keep ourselves and even the person that is antagonizing us free from legitimate harm? Now, it's not a right or wrong kind of thing, because yes, somebody's trying to hurt you. There are very many mentalities in reference to how to respond to that. Some incredibly aggressive, some a bit more passive, de-escalating, that sort of thing, and others use all of them. You go by the stages. You try to de-escalate. If that doesn't work, then you try to get out of there. If that doesn't work, then you have to go through the person. So there are different levels of it. But if you are stressed, if you are heightened and your cortisol is dumping, your adrenaline is running, at the de-escalation part, before you even get to the physical part, how much more stressed are you going to be if it gets to the point that it becomes a physical thing? You have to do something harmful to someone else. Or could you say that because you're already stressed at the beginning part of it, that may lead to it becoming a harmful thing, a physical thing? Could we have avoided it had we not been so stressed out, so rigid, or just so freaked out about the whole situation, because we weren't aware that we do that during training? And our bodies will automatically go back to the thing we train the most. And if that's the state in which you train, will you automatically go to that heightened stance where you're stressed out, where your brain is dumping cortisol, where you can no longer function at a higher level on the thinking process of it, that it becomes a fight, that it becomes something physical? We're seeing more and more research and even professional fighters that are doing less and less hard training. They don't have to go into the ring and, beat their training partners up or their sparring partners up, where it's more of a controlled environment where you're learning the ideas and the techniques, where you're understanding more instead of just going there and banging, which could potentially lead to an injury in your training. And then what happens there? You can't train for a while. So is it beneficial to go hard? Maybe, sometimes. There's a time and a place for it, definitely. Is there a time and a place to be relaxed and truly understand what's happening and go slow and smooth and steady and really understand how your body functions in a stressful situation so you can overcome it later on? Yeah, there's a time for that as well. This is definitely one of those topics that, to each their own. Everyone's going to have your own ideas and understanding, but we really have to question the history of it. Because I've heard so many stories from older practitioners. Oh, you think that was hard? Oh, you should have seen my teacher, how he used to do, how he used to hit us, how he used to flip us over and pretty much hurt us. And those injuries later on become something far worse, where you can't move as well as you could. Now, was that teacher doing it because that was their way of teaching, or was it because somebody did it to them and they just passed it on, and that's how their bodies react in that training environment? That stress shoots up so fast because that's what they know, that's what they experience their whole martial art career, so that's what they passed on to you, when it didn't necessarily have to be that way. So many people are getting away from that, well, for insurance reasons also, but there is benefit to it, and they're focusing on those benefits to then pass on the teachings to their students without necessarily having to harm them or putting them in that stressful situation, unless it is the purpose. Because there are some scenarios where you do need that stress. You need to feel that stress to be able to then understand, okay, this is what I need to focus on for training. So again, a time and a place for it. How do you as an instructor or as a student think about these things? How do you then overcome those things so they becomes beneficial regardless of what end of the conversation you find yourself? And has this conversation helped you in any way to then think about those things? I hope it does. I hope that's the reason why you watch, and I hope you like and subscribe and share with other people that might benefit from this conversation. So, thank you very much for joining me on this Nain short, and to the next one. As usual, 3, 2, 1, cut!